there's not 46 seconds left on our clock right now. That's just old news there. But it is Thursday, 8:15 a.m., and we're doing a special podcast today here on ND Talk called Unfiltered, where we have two special guests and Kyler with us to talk about some very important subjects that are facing our world. So first, Zach, why don't you introduce yourself, if you would?
Yeah, so my name is Zach Raknerud. I'm involved here in the Circus Valley DMPL, the chair of District 5. I've run for various offices in the last few years, and I'm happy to be joining. So thanks for having me.
Very good. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Rob Fuller, Minot City Council. I think I'm on here just about weekly for some reason or another. So
I don't know why.
Coming back again.
And I'm Kyler.
No, who are you? Why are you here?
What? You stole my answer. I am Kyler Collum, and I'm here to have fun.
Okay.
I've never heard those words associated with your podcast.
About having fun?
I have a blast every Tuesday and Thursday, and every other week when I see your podcast too, Rob.
Okay.
All right. So what we're going to be doing today is we have several topics, and we're going to be spending 5 minutes on each topic. At any point in time, if somebody gets passionate about the topic and just wants to go to the next level, they can call overtime, and 2.5 minutes will be added to the clock, and we'll keep the conversation going. I'm not commenting today. Today is just a day for moderating from me. So I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome.
Yeah, you guys. I feel like the energy is quite low in the room right now.
Well, I'm kind of confused. I thought we were having a Rorschach test with his tie before we started, but
I just wanted to bring up the tie today. I just felt like it was so.
That's awesome. I'm just giving you
it
a
was
hard
such a
time.
good day for our tie.
Awesome.
I'm glad you did. I thought the vest was going to be overkill, so I'm glad you're also
We went the double down on the vest on this
There
side.
we go.
Yeah, I showed them one of my options last night, and so
I
just
didn't
wanna-
disapprove.
No,
I'm up for everything.
Some type of acronym. I'm not sure what exactly it meant.
I thought you were against the 3-letter acronyms.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Well played, Kyler. Well played. We're gonna start off with this special topic of North Dakota school lunches. There's been a couple of bills in the legislature that has surrounded this issue, and it really comes down to whether or not there should be some type of government funding for school lunches. And so we're gonna get everybody's input on this matter. We'll kick it off with Kyler. Let the 5 minutes begin.
School lunches, all right. This is a fun one. Obviously, a big bill just recently failed in the state legislature. I think I'm going to keep this one a little shorter than it, but I think school lunches should be covered. I think they should be covered by the legacy fund. I don't think it should be a general fund thing. I have no issues with that being something that comes from the legacy fund. If it did come out of our general fund, I might be a little more questioning of it, but I think we have a plethora of an overbalance in our legacy fund. I think this is something that should easily cover it. I don't think I have any issue here. People might argue the morality of it. I just think this is something that would be good for the kids of North Dakota, and especially I think it can be tied into our state constitution and how it just determines education and the focuses and principles that it sets out for us.
Very good. Moving on, we'll go with the guy that decided to take a drink, Zach.
Of course.
Sorry.
So big support of using public funds for school meals, because there is only two things left in school that aren't covered, and it's supplies and it's school meals. Everything else across the board in schools is covered through our tax dollars. And so looking at the proposals from the legislature, I think I'm with Kyler on this one, that the legacy fund bill I think was a really good bill, because it didn't even take from the interest of the legacy fund, or excuse me, from the principal of the legacy fund. It used the interest that the fund is growing year on year in order to pay for that. And so when we talk about relief for families in the state, I think not only from a fiscal standpoint, but just the having to sit and pay the bill and having that on your mind for families when we don't have to do that with anything else in school. So textbooks, desks, etc. Get our kids fed, just take it off the table for families. I think that's the way to go. So I would support it.
Rob?
Yes. I'm going to agree with both of them. I think if it's feasibly fundable for the state to do, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. And I mean, I would say, hey, look, if you're looking at lunches, you should maybe look at breakfast too, right? They did that during the COVID pandemic.
100%.
And if the state has the money, it may not always be the case, but while it does, or a state has the money, our children need, obviously, it's been proven a number of times, our children need good health and wellness in order to learn correctly. And so I think that's an easy one. I don't think that's tough at all. And didn't they put out a number with one of the bills? What did they say it was going to cost the state? Like,
I want to say it was like in the ballpark of 100.
Yeah, 100 million or something like that. And we have a $20 billion budget, and we can't figure out where to take $100 million from
$11 billion
to feed all the
surplus.
kids. And I mean, there's a number of areas in North Dakota in the rural communities and everything else where I think, there's some maybe underprivileged people and the children aren't being adequately fed. And so, I mean, if we have the ability to do that, there's nothing more important in our world than our kids. So
got to take care of the next generation.
Absolutely.
I think part of the problem with the budget is that they just keep adding things to it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you have an extra 100 million, why give it to the kids? Let's go look at a prairie dog colony or, and determine if the radish should be the state vegetable or whatever it should be.
I thought rhubarb was the state fruit.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
All right, we're trying to.
Can we use the extra? We should have saved this topic for last. We all agreed on it.
Yeah, something's wrong about this.
That's a good way to kick it off. That's a good way to kick it off.
At the end they wouldn't have.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's possible.
I'm kidding. It's gonna be great. We're trying to make more drama than there is.
Let's use our last minute for the next topic.
All right. So moving on to the next topic. That was a nice, easy one to kick it off. We're going to go, though, to something else that affects this, and that's North Dakota property taxes. There's several bills that have been in the legislature about this, and now we're down to 3. We have what has been termed the governor's bill. We have Representative Lauser's bill, and we have Robin Wise's bill. All of these go about the subject from different ways, and, of course, your answers do not have to be held directly to just those 3 bills, but would love to get your guys' take on the solution to property taxes in North Dakota. We're kicking it off on property taxes with Rob.
Okay. Well, obviously, I was a fan of Measure 4. I think the state could eliminate property tax, or maybe not eliminate it, but alter it. And, ultimately, I think the 3 bills that are left out there right now, the proposed buy down and cap scheme, they fail to address the fundamental property tax challenges in the state of North Dakota. They honestly do. There's 2 things that really affect us up here, or, play it to this game. One is the disparity in the tax burden between the urban and the rural areas. And the other one's the arbitrary valuation methods that the state forces the municipalities to use, right? You got to use an assessed value within 10% of an appraised value. Well, all that does is force a city to keep raising the value of your home, because if you have people on council like myself who aren't going to allow you to just raise property tax arbitrarily, how do you do it? You raise the value of the house. And so I think a more equitable solution to that would honestly be like a flat tax system based on the square footage of the land that people own. It would ensure fairness across all residents, rural, urban, everybody. And then it'll also eliminate the need for the municipality to navigate these caps that they're talking about and the valuation fluctuations that you're going to see. Because right now, we've gotten values of homes so high, they've been talking about it since COVID. Most people don't think they'll ever be able to afford a home again. You couldn't build a home in Minot, North Dakota right now for less than $500,000. Who would have ever thought that that's something you would hear somebody say? So anyway, I think we should get rid of property tax, at least in the form that it's in.
Zach?
So now we'll kick off into some disagreement. My main contention with property tax reform is that I do not want to see a Measure 4. I was a huge the opposite of proponent? Can't think of the word right now.
Yeah,
but
antagonist.
Yes. Not a fan at all. I think that would have thrown our state into chaos, and the voters overwhelmingly rejected it for a reason. I think a lot of it has to do with the disparity with rural, urban, etc. But here's the thing: is that North Dakota voters, while they are pragmatic and smart in those issues in that way, they will not do this forever. If nothing gets done on property taxes, another Measure 4 will come down, and they will pass next time probably, even though it was overwhelmingly defeated. People want relief and they want reform. So when I look at the bills out there, I think that we're taking some good steps. Lauser's bill actually in particular has like the combination of relief and reform. So taking K through 12 meals and instituting caps. I think something along those lines that gets people to actually feel that relief is going to be necessary, because I don't want to see like a big solution like eliminating property taxes. And, we have a good education system in this state, and I don't want to see that risked. And so I would look to, any of these bills really that get relief and reform, I think is something I would hope to see.
Moving on to Kyler.
I don't trust any of these bills to give a full form of relief or reform. I think even if all three of them are merged, I don't know how well of a reform it would really be. I think Scott Lauser made a great point when he was on our show a week or so ago now. He was talking about how especially if it was 1176 was to get finalized.
That's the governor's bill.
Yep. It would it would likely hurt the new this first-time home buyers market even more than it's already damaged at this point. It would take the prices and turn them even more on top of where they're at. I think that to actually make some real reform, I think along what Rob, you were saying, you need to find something to actually go after the square footage, something that doesn't just affect just the primary resident. You have to do this across the board. You have to do something that affects the landowners and also the rental property owners. You have to do something that also helps the renters themselves. They need to have some kind of effect of this as well. They can't just have the rent be raised after the rental prices maybe get affected. But I want to see real reform. I would love to see property taxes be eliminated, especially on primary residences. But I don't know how possible it is in the near future. But again, I don't think any of the three bills currently in session are going to do anything for it.
Well, okay. I want to ask a sub question to this.
Please.
And we'll start with Zach on this. What does reform actually mean when it comes to property taxes? So is a buy down good enough as reform, or does it need more than that, basically?
Buy down I'd put more into the relief category. I think that's this frustration we saw from Governor Armstrong. He says, I'm not going to sign anything that has just relief in it, because we've tried that. We've taken the HHS mills from localities, and it can help in the short term, but then what ends up happening, as Rob I'm sure knows, is, like budgets just go up, and then all of a sudden whatever that relief was is just eaten up, and that's the new normal. And so
right.
Reform is something that institutes more of like the cap kind of thing in it, or like even like Kyler's proposal, like just making sure that like moving forward it's fundamentally different. That's kind of the reform.
But let me ask you real quick though, you keep talking about the caps. How are cities supposed to do anything, like us as an example in Minot? If they cap us and say you can raise it 3% a year, that means we can bring in an extra $840,000 as a city a year through property tax. All our sales tax pennies are tied up. So if we have an issue, we have a problem, what are we supposed to do as a municipality? I would argue that rather than putting a cap on everybody, because I know during the Measure 4 campaign, your guys' side had to keep it local people. Well, with the state capping us, how is that keeping it local? We're going to have to ask the state for funding or help if we can't raise the money ourselves. And so I wholeheartely disagree on the caps, and I think that ultimately, you have to reform. You have to find a way to take the burden that is now specifically on a smaller group of people and pass it across the whole state, right? Mm-hmm. Farmers, ranchers, I'm sorry. Everybody needs to pay their fair share. You all come to town, you all buy stuff, you all use our services and everything. It's time to spread that burden evenly. I mean, for me in Minot, North Dakota, to have to pay $10,000 on my house, but Farmer Joe Bob that lives outside of town on a quarter of land that has $1 million house, that has that quarter of land that produces a couple $100,000 in income a year, he has to pay nothing on that because it's his home quarter. That isn't fair, and it will never be an issue that can be resolved in this state until they pass the burden across to everybody.
So the answer to the question is referendum. So a lot of these bills, they have exceptions where you can go to the city and go to the populace. And if you want to go above the cap, then you have to get a vote of the people. And I think that is a better solution because, over time, if you have a cap, it's more of a steady growth rather than just boom, like we've seen lately. And so if you want to raise things bigger, then you can go to the vote of the people.
Well, but how many people are ever going to vote to tax themselves?
I think plenty if it's for
I'll
something
take that
good.
Bet. Let's watch this.
We've seen
let's
it in
watch
North
this.
Dakota.
Let's watch this.
Didn't
summer.
we have a vote on like the new school and everything? Like the people when they realize
6,000 people voted.
Yeah, well, that's how it would go forward.
But
People
I think what you're going to see, and what I was pointing to is the this summer. So we have a half-cent sales tax out there. We'll see what the appetite for the people is to tax themselves. Honestly, I mean, because you can say that. But if we'd have had to have a referendum on the flood control stuff and we'd have had to have everybody vote on it, do you think that anybody in this town would have voted to spend $1 billion on flood control?
I think that the local share of it, yeah. Like it's a lot of federal, it's a lot of state.
Our local share is ballooning. It's going up constantly. So, I mean, I don't think when you have a moving target, anybody's going to vote to approve that tax.
I think it depends when the vote would have taken place, too.
That could be as well.
If it was immediately after the flood, I think it's much more likely to have passed.
Yeah, or if it's in 2022 and inflation's at its all-time high, that's it's all seasonal.
Mm-hmm. So, and there's a commentator, and that Cindy says, which is a great comment, cut spending and live within your means, like normal people do at the end. And this is the really interesting dichotomy of this question, because you have some cities that are cutting spending. Minot has cut spending. You have other cities that were intentionally trying to max out their budgets to the highest potential they could, just in case that there was some type of property tax relief or reform that was passed that was going to lock in the amount that they have. It's like
that's why Measure 4 was so disastrous. Like they had all these
but
they were maxing their spending so that they could lock it in.
But you have the governor's plan, which is going to be somewhat now it's gotten changed, but in its original form was going to be a lot along the same lines, where the states just, if you got your budget high enough, then you could go 3% higher based off that, because everything's based off the current budget. I think that's the weird part on the reform and the relief plans, that everything's on the current budget. There's nothing else looked at.
I think we can all agree that we'd like to see the evaluation process changed.
Well, 100%.
I don't really,
Maybe not?
I haven't looked so much into the evaluation process. Like I've seen my property value, like specifically, it has gone up a lot, but I wonder how much that has to do with the market overall. I mean, we have a shortage of supply. Like if we were to actually invest in it as a country into increasing our housing supply, maybe we'd finally see valuations go down, because supply and demand is the game.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on. We allowed some overtime.
We took time from the first talk. It's fine.
Was that the moderator overtime?
I don't know. I'm using my discretion. Nobody gets tagged with it at this point. It might be mine. All right, we're going to move on to ND's role, North Dakota's role in K through 12 education. And Kyler did a deep dive on this last night. He went into the Constitution and everything else. I'm spoiling his fun. And I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to. But we're going to have Zach kick off this. Basically, how involved should North Dakota government be involved in K through 12? And there's some bills that we're trying to help private education along with public education and that kind of dichotomy. Just go ahead and break this down from your point of view.
Yeah, K through 12 education. So, not to get ahead of Kyler here, but I've also
you're gonna quote it, aren't you?
I'm not going to quote it because I left my notebook at home. But reading through,
you.
I think the North Dakota State Constitution does a really good job outlining exactly kind of the priorities we should have with K through 12 education. I'm super proud of North Dakota. I grew up in Northwood, North Dakota, a town of 900 people, and I'm really proud of the rural education I received. And that's the big overarching picture I have, is with these bills that are in the legislature right now, I really, really, really hope that they do not pass. These HSAs, they call them. So HSA, sorry, that's for healthcare. ESA for education savings account. They're trying to, vouchers in the past have failed in North Dakota. People don't like them around here broadly. And so now they're kind of rebranding them as education savings accounts. And they're taking money from our general fund and they're allocating it to private school tuition. And as you all know, we have a limited state budget here in North Dakota. All the dollars that go to private education like that are dollars that are not going to go to public education. And especially at this moment in time, a big hammer is likely going to drop by the end of session here, where we're going to lose significant federal funding, potentially. I hope not, but this is not the time to do it. We need to keep public dollars in public schools.
Let's go Rob next.
Well, when you put that in there, I understood it to mean, should we pay for school for everybody in K through 12? And, my answer was simply, North Dakota currently pays roughly 85% of the total school budget. And again, if it's possible, it's not a hard lift. I mean, that extra 15% should be pretty easy for the state of North Dakota. So I think we should, as a state, obviously fund both public and private schools as much as we can in the state to help make sure everybody receives education.
Kyler.
To quote the state constitution, Section 8, Article 2, the Legislative Assembly shall provide at its first session after the adoption of this constitution for a uniform system for free public schools throughout the state, beginning with the primary and extending through all grades up to and including the normal and collegiate course. So, and then to further on in Section 5, all colleges, universities, and other educational institutions for the support of which lands have been granted to the state or which are supported by a public tax shall remain under the absolute and exclusive control of the state. No money raised for the support of public schools of the state shall be appropriated to be to or used for the support of any sectarian school. So to go on both of those points a little bit, I think that this, based on the state constitution, the state should fully cover any public school. I was, before reading this, as I was texting Jonathan last night, I was having a little crisis because I was all for vouchers generally going to any kind of public choice for any school in period. However, after reading the Constitution and it excludes sectarian schools, I am very conflicted on the voucher program now. I still think it. I'm torn on it, frankly. I don't know how to fully go on it, but I think for a fact that schools should be covered publicly by the state, and the vouchers could maybe be worked into a degree, but I'm not sure that a full coverage of or we have to change the Constitution. That's my take on that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also I think it would be important to sub-ask this, since we're going to the Constitution. A sub-question on this would be, should there be property tax dollars then that's paying for public schools? And we'll start with you on that.
That's a fair question, and I think that I'm going to go no tentatively, but I also could be persuaded elsewise. But I think that it should be something that's covered to the state through the normal tax procedure. I guess if that includes property taxes to the state, then sure. But otherwise, I think that those typically go to the municipality. So I would say that this should be covered through I would also be fine with this being covered through the legacy fund. I think that's something that could genuinely work and could be something that could be promoted as a legacy building project to cover the schools for our students.
And because of that, it says free public schools. Right now, is it truly free to the people?
Not at this point, no. Especially when you have, like Zach was mentioning, supplies that are definitely not covered, and this is something that...
Or when you look at the school board's freaking property tax, nothing is free.
Exactly. So. That's a lot of which are through the roof.
I'm guessing, so when the Constitution says that, I assume it means free at the point of service. So if you go to school, you're not going to pay tuition, essentially.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think one thing I would really like to highlight here is, so Republican Representative Anna Novak stood up on the chamber and basically said that our rural schools are like dilapidated. We have a lot of issues in our rural schools. 93% of our students in North Dakota go to public school, and then only like a small fraction of even counties in North Dakota have access to a private school. Most of these are going to be in your anchor cities, like the four main ones. So North Dakota is unique in that sense. Like, and I don't know if like those in the audience and here at the table know, but like North Dakota and Nebraska stand alone as states that do not have private school vouchers and do not have charter schools. And I'm dang proud of that. I think that we have a great public education system here in North Dakota. Our teachers are wonderful. Our administrators are doing a great job. They're trying their best. I really hope that we continue this tradition of continuing to keep public dollars in public schools.
I'll use my OT.
Oh, wow.
I saw we were out of time. I think
I'll really want to go further in this one.
I have more to say. I know Rob does, and I have a follow-up. Do you have more?
Right,
I guess maybe I'm stuck.
Whatever you got. You're up.
Okay.
It's your time.
No, I want to keep going with that because I think, especially when you look at how the colleges and universities are mentioned in this, I think that if North Dakota were to fully expand on its education system as it's laid out in its constitution, we would be to the point where I don't think we would need to have vouchers for private schools. I don't think we would even need much of a sense for private schools unless it's obviously something that's wanted from the parents and from a community that it's deemed necessary. I think if we lived up to the principles that are set out in our constitution here, that we could have some, and I do think we have a great education system in the state. However, I think this could be even more efficient. I think it could be one of the best in the country, and I think this could be something that other states could take as an example to set forth on how they can also have their education systems matched. I mean, maybe it's harder for a place like, California, New York, or Florida, where they have millions and millions of people, where we have, 800,000 in the state. It's easier for us to fund something like this through the state government, but I think we absolutely should because we can, and if we have to, I think use the legacy fund. This is something that could be fantastic for the future of our state.
Interesting. So you feel like if the public schools met the criteria that's set out in the Constitution, that there would be no need, and I'm going to name a specific school, for Bishop Ryan?
I think that it would allow there not to be a need. However, I think there could be a demand for it still.
Are you going to let Christianity into the public schools then?
Of course, I think you let everyone into public schools.
No, I'm going to say,
Everything.
are you going to let them teach Christianity and Catholicism and everything in public schools? Because that's why you have our Redeemers and
100%.
Bishop Bryan and those schools, because there's such a fuss raised about being able to teach that or talk about it in public schools.
No, completely so. And I think that's why that demand would continue, and there could be a separate, there still would be those schools likely.
You're saying separate from the public. Right?
Yes, I think that this would allow, I think our public schools would be exceptional to a point if we followed our Constitution, that we wouldn't necessarily have as much of a need for them, but I think there would still be a demand for them because a lot of the population would still want that. And also the first point of your question, I think that it should be something that's allowed as an elective in high schools.
Fair enough. I'm going to focus on a little bit different part of this whole conversation, and that's the funding the public schools but not the private schools thing. So if the state's going to fund, the state should fund everything, because just as an example, I send my kids to Bishop Bryan, but I pay the school board's property tax every single year. So if you're going to not fund me, but I'm still paying in, then I should get a voucher so I don't have to pay because I'm not using your public school system. But if you're going to fund, I'm not suggesting that we go that way, but if you're going to fund, you should fund all. I think, what is it, each kid at the Minot Public Schools is worth, in the state's eyes, like $10,134 or something like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what the state gives them. My tuition on my kid is half of that. So why can't the state fund the tuition? I'm not saying they have to pay for anything else, but they, again, And I understand the argument is, it's a private school, but I'm paying for the public schools, right?
That's your choice, though, to send your kids to private school. And
absolutely.
The private school has a choice whether to take your kids. If your kid had a developmental disability, God forbid, they could just say, no, your kid's not allowed in our school, and that's why
I've never seen a public
they have the ability,
or private school say that.
But public schools have the mandate to teach every single kid, and
Yes,
special ed and everything.
But
And that's why tax
we also
dollars
have
go there.
we also have other facilities set up for those special needs kids, right? I mean,
Public.
they aren't necessarily all at Minot High or whatever. They're at some of the other developmental schools that are out there, right?
Those are all publicly funded.
Correct. I understand that. But what I'm saying is again, my choice still, if the state is going to fund, the state should fund at least some for everybody, not just say, hey, for the public school people. Because again, I choose to send my child there because you tell me you will not teach Christianity or Catholicism there. So I didn't have a choice. You told me as a state, we don't believe in teaching that in our public schools.
We don't believe establishing any religion as the U.S. Constitution says.
But you could teach it. You don't have to establish it as the main religion. You could teach it, and
But they do establish it. I think you know that it's literally a Catholic school.
Well, correct. I mean, and that's our option because there is no other option, right? I mean, so again, if you're going to fund
like a private Muslim school, would you send your kid there just because it's
If I wanted him to learn about Islam, I absolutely would.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the choice I make because the public schools don't do that. Right? If the public school taught it and I could send my kid to school for free, sure, I'd probably send him.
On principle, I agree, but I think we'd have to we should change the state constitution in that.
It would have to be adjusted. Absolutely.
How does the state constitution need to be adjusted? Because it says that all colleges, universities, and other educational institutions for the support of lands. I'm reading the wrong part. That's not the part that I wanted. Except that basically it says that public money or money that's allocated for the public schools should not be used for private schools. But it does not say that the state cannot.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And so what it's saying, though, is if you have property taxes, the way I understand it, which I still think is another question that we could debate at a different time, but if you have property taxes that's allocated for public schools, you can't then use that money for private schools. But if the state legislature decided to say, hey, we're going to do this and it's going to help private schools as well, I don't think the state constitution fights back against that.
No, but I think they would have to clear up the language just a little bit to make sure somebody couldn't sue or couldn't go the other way. That's all I meant when I said it would have to be adjusted.
So it says no money raised for the support of the public schools of the state shall be appropriated to or used for the support of any sectarian school. And I think that's the line that you're addressing. So that all saying is if it's money that's specifically for the public schools, you can't use it for a different.
That's exactly what the committee said during these hearings, is that they were clear. They're saying this is not coming from the K through 12 dollars. This is coming from the general fund.
Right.
So general fund isn't technically appropriated for education, so they're able to get around that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. We're going to go to some national topics.
Uh-oh.
So it's going to get fun. Zach's going to lead us off on this topic, and it's going to be the one of the economy, tariffs, Canada, stock market. It's all going crazy right now.
It's the
Go ahead and
economy.
just hit the overtime thing right now, please.
Going to need 20 minutes on this topic. Zach, tariffs good thing? Is our relationship with Canada messed up? Is the stock market going to be all right? What are we looking at?
So I'm just going to set the foundation here real quick. So Trump first term, I disagree with the guy. I did not, there's plenty of policy I did not like from him. But this second term has been just like extremism to the max and just completely broken from reality. And I think we're going to be seeing some really harsh consequences for that. So staying on the topic of Canada, Donald Trump negotiated the USMCA in 2018. And so to see this goalpost being moved constantly of saying, it's because of fentanyl, when less than 0.2% of fentanyl gets from Canada. And now all of a sudden it's because of this lopsided trade between the two countries, even though all these extra tariffs that Canada has is literally written into the USMCA that he called the greatest trade deal of all time. We are nuking our relationship with our closest ally, where, by the way, for North Dakota specifically, 83% of our exports go out of here to Canada. 63% of imports come in from Canada. This is reckless. There's no reason for it. We're going to be feeling the consequences of this one for a long time. We just saw that the French government surfaced a nuclear submarine off the coast of Canada. They're moving their troops over to Michigan because Donald Trump is saying he wants them to be our 51st state, and he's not joking, guys. This is not cool. This is from the beaches of Normandy to 9/11 to constant wildfires. Canada has been the best neighbor we could ever ask for, and we're spitting in their face. Why? This makes no sense at all. This is a dereliction of duty by the president. Honestly, if we lived in a real world, he should be impeached for this. This is nonsense. These are our friends. These are our allies. Why are we doing this? I could go on and on, but I'm going to respect the time of the 5 minutes and let others talk. That's my
Rob.
start.
Okay, fair.
Gosh, so many things to unpack there. First, the economy was a mess from the previous 4 years under the Biden administration. And you can shake your head all you want, but the inflation was real. The lack of people having money in their pockets was real. The prices of everything is real. So again, the economy was in a shambles. I think it started necessarily during COVID. I don't think the Biden administration's monetary policy or politics as a whole did anything to help it. It really hindered it. But here's a couple more tariff things for you. So on average, U.S. goods are the highest tariffed goods in the whole world, everywhere they go. And on average, most of the world's goods that are imported here are the lowest tariffs, some of the lowest, if not the lowest tariffs that are offered in the world. We are such a good trading partner for everybody out there, but we're constantly getting taken advantage of. You can smile and laugh all you want, but when we have a $63 billion shortfall in a trading with a partner that's supposedly our best friend, we're supplementing their income.
How many less people does Canada have, Rob?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't matter
when
at all.
they're buying from us, you don't think having less than a third of our population matters?
Well, they are buying from us. You talked about the North Dakota exports. Here's one for you. So they slap tariffs on every single farm product crossing the border to go to Canada. Did you know that? Every single
think it's true.
Oh, it is. It is. I have them all right here for you.
Anything that's in there would be negotiated in the USMCA. So we'll take the dairy for one example, just real quick.
Dairy products, dairy butter, 165% tariff.
Do you know how many times that tariff's been paid?
Milk, 155%. Well,
how many times has it been paid?
What do you mean? How many times has it been paid?
0.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
That's absolutely not true.
Yes, it is. It's a supply-based tariff, and what Canada does. So the U.S. we subsidize our dairy by tens of billions a year. Canada uses a managed supply. Mm-hmm. That is an over quota tariff. That is only if Canada exceeds the amount of imports, and it has never been reached before. So it's fine to cite those numbers.
They're sitting there. They're sitting there, right? If you do this, you're going to be billed this. So if we
and what agreement was that in?
Again, it doesn't matter
Yes,
what
it
agreement
does.
it is in.
USMCA.
He may have negotiated that agreement to fix the NAFTA agreement, right? I mean, NAFTA was a complete joke. Mexico and Canada were absolutely doing whatever they wanted. We were losing manufacturing to both of those countries because it was cheaper for our businesses to send their factories over there, and then we get hit with tariffs when they import that stuff back in our country. Like, last week when we talked about this tariff thing a little bit, I had talked and tongue-in-cheek made the joke that Canada doesn't manufacture cars. Some guy got on there and was all upset about that, right? So I know Canada has car manufacturing up there. They actually have 2 plants or 4 plants, whatever it is, both of them Honda and Toyota. The Ford and GM plants are not car manufacturing plants, they're engine manufacturing plants. Now, the reason Canada has car manufacturing plants is because in the 80s, Ronald Reagan helped them negotiate for Honda and Toyota to create plants up there so they weren't paying tariffs when those cars were coming from overseas, right? So we helped them do that. Then in the 90s, under NAFTA, Bill Clinton again helped negotiate 2 more factories up there so they could have a little bit better income, and we weren't having to worry about their economy all the time. Now, they make an engine up there. They ship it down to us for Ford and GM. We don't charge them a tariff. We put it in the car, and then we send the car across the border, and guess what they do? They put a tariff on it, minus the engine. They do it on the frame, the body, and everything else. They put a tariff on it that we're supposed to be okay with. Now, that isn't fair trade in any way, shape, or form to our country. You could argue.
I've not seen that substantiated anywhere. I've not seen any automotive tariffs that exist.
You can, and that's kind of common for the left to always say, well, I've never seen that. I've never read it. I mean,
you have the burden of proof, Rob. Like, where did you see
the burden of proof? They're right here. They have the numbers out there. All you got to do is go out and Google it.
Yeah, I did. And there's no automobile tariffs.
There's no automobile tariff?
No.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
here's my take on tariffs. I think tariffs are extremely unfair for all the consumers. Period.
Absolutely.
Anywhere and everywhere. I believe tariffs are a tax on the consumer, and the people that have the working class people are the ones who are the ones that get the most hurt from all of these. I believe that tariffs are not the way. I don't believe retaliatory tariffs against any country from any perspective are the way to go. I think it just hurts the working class. It hurts the lower class. I won't disagree that the long game is that this is going to help our economy. I'm not going to say it won't happen, but I say for a fact in the short term that people like us are the ones that are going to be most affected, and the billionaires that are parading Teslas around the White House front lawn are going to be the ones that could care less about tariffs and increasing consumer prices, because they're the ones that are going to be they have.
But consumer prices are already at the highest they've been in most of our lifetimes. And
yes.
when was?
Well, yeah, that's how it works.
Is that tariffs' fault or Donald Trump's fault?
I'm saying it's not going to get lowered anytime soon.
Well, the CPI and the PPI came out yesterday and today, and guess what? They're both lower year over year. One of them was lower month over month, which indicates that prices are coming down on a lot of goods.
A lot of this has to do with the fact that tariffs haven't even gone into effect yet. Really, they've been on and then off and on and then off. If we were to have months of these tariffs, we're going to see those prices.
They're a negotiating tactic.
They're not negotiating.
They're a negotiating tactic.
It's the worst negotiation strategy I've ever seen in my life, if it is.
Well, I mean, 2 months in, that's easy to say. Let's see what happens after the end of 4 years.
And that's fair, but
let's see what happens in the next 10 years.
And here's one thing from Ron Paul. So obviously there's a lot of talk that the revenue from tariffs could offset like an income tax decrease. Absolutely. So he
15 seconds.
Tariffs could increase revenue by $145 billion this year. That would be over $1,000 in additional taxes on each household on average. You can argue that it's spread out more and income tax reductions would help that. But again, is this a net gain or just a wash for consumers at this point? And again, gradually, you can say it increases our general pay and what we get every day, but when we still have to pay more for consumers and prices and goods in general, who really takes the hit from that? And again, maybe in the long run it's going to work out, but in the short run, I think we're the ones that are going to be affected worse.
Moving on to the next topic, which is Russia, Ukraine. I know it's tough. That one I think we could have.
You might need to do a 2-hour one of these. Like,
on that
isn't pardon the interruption like an hour and a half when it's on or something like that?
It's a half hour only though.
Jeez, quit your day job and let's do this for real.
All right.
Hey, we do it at night. I do 2 hours. Why not?
There we go. Russia, Ukraine.
Oh, geez.
Who starts?
You actually get to start, which is, again, it's all random. The Ukraine-Russia war has gone on since February 22, 2022, receiving hundreds of billions of dollars from the U.S. government. Trump has made it a priority to end the war, and that has caused some interesting and viral moments. Most recently, Rubio stated that Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire. The ball was now in Russia's court. I think there's even an update on that I just saw come through while we were live. How has the United States and Trump handled this situation? What are your thoughts on the whole deal? However you want to answer it. Go ahead, Rob.
In the beginning, I think I was okay with everything, but as things have progressed over the last 3.5, almost 4 years, let Russia have them, right? I mean, we can bolster our defenses in Poland and Romania, just like we have right now. I don't think that Ukraine and Zelensky has been very fair. I mean, the guy was a comedian before he was the president of the country, and now he has 6 or 7 homes all over the world. He's got 2 $40 million yachts. I don't think he was that successful of a comedian, right? So, in my mind, the Biden administration used this as a cash grab, plain and simple. It was money laundering scheme for campaign donations through FTX. We'd give Ukraine $100 billion. They'd take $1 billion and invest it with FTX, and then Sam Bankman-Fried would turn around and donate a bunch of campaign donations to all the Democrats. And you can shake your head again all you want, Zach, but there's actually proof out there where the money went, and that was talked about during Bankman-Fried's trial. So it's shady. I think it was... I think it was just a situation that was taken advantage of by a lot of people in our government and in the Ukrainian government. So...
All right, Zach, go ahead.
Oh, man. Where to begin? Just with your opening remarks, man. I mean, I don't want to sound too harsh, and I respect you, Rob. I think you're a nice guy. You seem like a nice guy. We're just meeting now for the first time, but let Russia have Ukraine is like one of the most un-American things I've ever heard in my life. But
Ukraine isn't America, so why do I
reserving
care?
the balance of my time? Reserving the balance of my time. Let Russia have them. Okay, so first off, let's just talk about the fact that this is like Western values versus like authoritarianism, and like we even looking back in history here, like when this first started, the South Dakota legislature had a unanimous resolution to support Ukraine, because this is like, when you look at the wartime movies of the 1980s and everything, this is like it in real life, like the Ukrainian people fighting for their freedom. It's incredible to me that we have, like you saying, to just let Russia have them. Like, this is freedom and democracy versus
Aren't you tired of paying for a war?
I'm getting to that point. So I'm going down your list here. Number 2, these awful theories about Vladimir Zelensky. I don't know where you're getting your media, Rob, but you need to branch out. Like, holy moly, dude, that is insane. Like, this man stayed behind. All of the leaders of the free world were saying, we're going to medevac you out of there. Like, let's get you the heck out so you can remain as president and be stable. And he stayed on the front lines. This man's not interested in
He's on the front lines?
Okay, you know what I mean. Like, in the war zone, in the conflict zone, and when he had the option to get out. Money for arms. We're sending Ukraine like our old stuff. And so how this money is calculated is that they actually take the cost of when it was originally made plus inflation. So when you actually like talk about the fact and factor in depreciation, instead of like a closer to 100 billion, it's more like 40 billion. This has been one of the greatest investments we can make as a country, because Russia is a paper tiger. We see that now. 3 years and they're tiny little neighbor, and they've barely crept in. Like, this is an incredible feat by Ukraine. We need to be supporting them, and just to give this up on the world stage and shattering relationships with our European allies, none of this is going to age well. I promise you that.
I believe it is fully time to end the Ukraine and Russia war. I think Trump has an incredible opportunity to be a global leader and come forth and use some of his strongman tactics to bring both sides together and finally end this. It's been 3 years. We have spent hundreds of billions of dollars that we shouldn't have on this, and it's finally to the point now where it can be ended, and Trump can do something that would be one of his, I think, greatest achievements in getting this ended. I would love to see it happen. However, I fully think that Ukraine should be guaranteed its independence. I don't believe that Russia should be able to take a precedent that we set in the early 2000s in invading Iraq and Afghanistan and take that and use that to be able to invade the Ukraine. If they are or not, that's a different question, I guess. But I believe that this is something that should be over and done with. They can keep what they've invaded. I could care less at this point, but I believe from this point forward, Ukraine's independence should be guaranteed. And also on that same line, I believe that if I still believe in the Monroe Doctrine, and the U.S. should be the bastion of democracy, but also I don't believe we should be the world police and funding everything in the same respect.
Can I ask you both a question then? If we're going to just,
Please.
Because in 2016, when Obama was president, or 15, whatever it was, when Russia invaded Ukraine and took Crimea from them. How come nobody stood up then and said we need to do something and we need to spend billions of dollars? And everybody just said, okay, Ukraine, go back to your corner, stay quiet, and let them have that. Why?
That's not true.
It isn't true?
No. Like
when did Russia invade Ukraine and take the Crimea?
Okay, so first off, like an annexation of a specific area is a lot different than a full-scale invasion.
That was an invasion of their country, and
so
they took
an
the
annexation
port.
of a certain area is different. And number two, we
Was
did,
that part of Ukraine or Russia?
It was, and I'm saying full-scale invasion, Rob, is different than annexation of a specific area. And let me finish my point, please. And we did push back. We did send arms. Donald Trump himself sent arms during his presidency. This idea that like nothing was happening during his presidency is untrue. Like the whole reason for his please,
Obama.
Rob, please.
It happened under Obama.
I understand the initial part happened, but conflict continued through Donald Trump's presidency, and he didn't do anything about it. In fact, the whole reason for his first impeachment was because he was withholding congressionally approved aid to Ukraine. Think they were just getting that for kicks and giggles? No, they were getting it because they were fighting off the Russians in the Donbass. Like, this has been an ongoing conflict for a long time. It didn't just start.
All right. Got to move on. Sorry, guys.
On to the next.
On to the next. All right. The next one, we go to something national, get out of the international waters, and go to a recent interview that Gavin Newsom did with Charlie Kirk. And in that interview, Gavin Newsom is quoted as saying, well, concerning boys playing in female sports, he said, well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It's an issue of fairness. It's deeply unfair. This quote seems surprising coming from Newsom. Is this Newsom changing his position? Is this Newsom trying to position himself as a moderate in hopes of a presidential run? What is the feedback on this? We are going to kick it off with Zach.
See, this interview was something. I watched the entire thing actually just a couple days before I even got the invite, or it was the topic list, I mean, and holy moly, that was the biggest own goal by somebody left of center that I've ever seen in my life. Just having Charlie Kirk on and being like, I appreciate that, and not pushing back on anything he said. It was infuriating to watch. But anyways, to stay on topic here.
That's his style. I know that's his style because he has other ones and he constantly is just affirming.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah.
He seems to be positioning himself for some kind of run, but I'll tell you, as somebody left of center, like, we do not want him. Gavin Newsom does not represent, like, those of us who are on the left of center at all. We'll fight tooth and nail to make sure he's not our nominee in 28. But if he is, I guess we'll see. That hopefully not. Anyways, on the topic of this whole issue, so clearly this is an issue where, like, the American people need to see the left of center moderate on, like, the perception of, you know, people who were born biologically male in female sports. And so, like, I will tell you, like, for the vast majority of people left of center, this has always been, like, a pretty obvious issue. Like, it's unfair. We don't want to see that kind of thing. But then the flip side of the coin is that transgender people are real. Like, gender dysphoria has existed. It's documented for millennia that this has been a condition. Human brains are immensely complicated. Sometimes things get, like, you know, change in the brain, and you can have situations where maybe the way the body presents is not matching what the brain is. Just as a side note, we should really be studying that and finding out more answers instead of cutting out all the funding for research, but I digress. The issue of this is that, you know, I think that we're also swinging too far in the other way, where just a full-on ban across the board is not going to solve, like, a lot of, you know, hurt that's going to be in this country. Because you talk about, like, a badminton club in Idaho, like, and their peers really support, you know, somebody who's gender nonconforming. Like, are we really going to solve this by, you know, bullying those people? I don't think so. I think that we could be reasonable. We can be honest about what's going on here and try to come to, like, a good decision as adults rather than just blanket.
Go ahead.
So I have age dysphoria. I think I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. I want to go play t-ball against your kids. You guys going to be okay with that? Absolutely not.
Question.
Nobody is. And that's the same thing with men and women's sports. I understand.
Not even remotely comparable, but okay.
Oh, absolutely it is. I understand that there's gender dysphoria out there, and that's perfectly fine. If a person is dealing with that, I get it. But we can't have them playing in girls' sports. They're men. They're physically and biologically stronger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that's going to change that. You know, I mean, you see year after year after year, case after case documented where some female gets hurt because a transgender person hurt them in the sport. You know, I mean, there was colleges that were stopping their volleyball teams from playing because the guy that was a girl playing volleyball was hurting other women in the sport. Like, it just is a thing that can't happen in this country. You're right. It isn't fair to them. There will be some hurt, but we have to be fair to everybody else that's doing it, right? The girls in sports. I mean, Title IX was a thing so women had advantages in sports that they had never gotten before. And now here we are, all these people that stuck up for women and women's sports, now they're like, hey, go ahead and let the dudes play in there. We're good with that. And that just isn't right. And so to your question, Gavin Newsom, I think what he said was absolutely political and for a run to try and see if he can get enough concerted people around him to say, hey, yeah, you should run for president. Because to Zach's point, I think most of the people in the middle and most of the people on the right would be like, absolutely not. So,
Tyler.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. With the latter take, I think Gavin Newsom's fully setting himself up for a 2028 presidential bid. However, I think this was a great move on his part. Having Charlie Kirk as your first podcast guest as the governor of California, I think was a great move on his part, and I say that from someone who has been a critic of Gavin Newsom, and I don't like him at all.
Who's funding his podcast?
I don't
think you really need much funding to launch a podcast.
He's got the good mics, though. I'll give him that. But I bet he.
You guys should reach out to him then.
I bet he has enough self-funding that he is able to cover it. But also, I think he's partnered with iHeartMedia, so I bet they're doing something for it too. But again, on the bigger question, I think that he's seeing the reality of it, and this is like, I think they were saying it's an 80-20 split on this issue. It's not a fair thing for men to be playing sports against women. I do think that you could make some exceptions because it is unfair to a lot of to some trans people in this case, but I think generally across the board, it's not a fair thing for men to be playing with women.
Yep, I'll call my overtime.
Okay, here we go.
So one thing I really want to highlight for the audience and for those at the table is just that this issue is constantly used as something to distract people and to like I'm not saying that these issues that you talk about, like the specific ones where people are getting hurt, I'm not saying that that's not significant, but at the same time, like we're talking like single digits of people across the country. In the grand scheme of the problems that we have in this country, we can tackle them and we can try to be more reasonable about this issue specifically. But the way I've seen it weaponized nationally, like the fact that the Kamala Harris ad, like she's for they, them, Trump's for you, the fact that ended up being like the biggest ad it's just sad to me because like we have so many more issues in this country that we can really try to tackle. And, this one should be one that we can have a good discussion about and like try to be, good to people, but at the same time, like the fact that it's just eaten up so much of the national dialogue is just troubling to me because there's a lot more going on.
Can I ask a question real quick?
In short, I agree with that.
Did you just say that we shouldn't do something because it only affects a small amount of people?
I didn't, no. I said that maybe like...
You did. You said only a small amount of people are getting hurt, so it really shouldn't be that big of a deal.
I said for the small amount of people to take up the lion's share of the national attention is a bit of a disproportionate.
Well, it's kind of the similar thing with this. It's a small amount of people that want to do this, right? And we're being asked to change everything so they can do that because of something that affects them, not the rest of us.
I don't really know if we're changing much.
I think from both sides, this is certainly a culture war issue that is far and away blown out of proportion to the national audience. However, I think that I don't think men should be allowed to play sports with women.
Especially with North Dakota. I mean, we haven't had a single case of this in North Dakota. I mean, not to say it could never happen, but like nationwide, that's the kind of numbers we're talking about.
And I'm not well versed on it. Have we not had a single case because it wouldn't be accepted as well in North Dakota, or because there just legitimately has not been a case?
That's a good question. I mean, okay. I know from my school back, I've heard that there is like a transgender student. I think a lot of the time when you have like a transgender person say that we're going from male to female, like that's what the condition they have. A lot of the time they're just not going to play sports because they understand like if they've gone through puberty, like with male chromosomes, like they're going to have an advantage. And just real quick on my overtime, I just want to throw in there that like I find it super rich that like for years and years we had this this thing hurled against the left that says, what is a woman? And they say like, well, come on, lib, a woman is a human with female reproductive organs. And then we have Amin Khalif come through and she's female and has female reproductive organs. But now it's like, but if you look in the chromosomes, there's actually this weird test they did. And like the goalpost is always moving and it's just frustrating.
Yeah. Going back to Newsom's podcast, there's no discussion on this. And I mean, you guys can comment, but it's not extending the discussion. His 3 people that he's had on so far is Charlie Kirk, Michael Savage and Steve Bannon. It's
Funny how that works, isn't it?
It's all.
And that would be fine if he pushed back and actually had a debate like we're having, where we go back and forth and disagree with each other. But he's just like,
I appreciate that.
I appreciate
great.
that.
This is a temperature taker to see how the national people feel about him.
And they're all going to boo him and throw tomatoes at him.
Yeah.
Anybody who likes
It's
him.
Look,
also
I can
straight to moderate
associate with Republicans and conservatives and talk. And
But on the flip side, I bet when he gets on a debate stage with other Democrats, he will do well. I'm not saying he'll be popular, but I'm saying he'll do well in a debate setting.
Well, watching him and DeSantis, I don't know about that. He kind of dropped the ball on that one too.
Well, DeSantis had the San Francisco map. That was.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Should the other questions probably just are not as fun as what we're coming out of? Should North Dakota prohibit foreign governments from buying farmland? Basically, how far should North Dakota go? North Dakota,
Yeah, you bet.
go,
You bet.
go with
Coda.
go with protecting their land and their farmland against we'll just say it, foreigners. Leading off, Kyler.
Hey, that's me. It's a tough one. So I understand Americans and North Dakotans should probably be the ones to have the first purchase of that, to have the first ability to purchase that land. It could also be argued that the American dream is coming to America to be able to purchase your own land. But I also understand why we wouldn't want to have foreign governments purchasing land, especially like the Fufang project, where it's in very close relation to a very confidential military base. So I understand why you wouldn't want governments purchasing them, and having foreign nationals come in, you can always say they're influenced by their government or they're led by their government. So I understand why you could ban that, or you use some certain ways to get around that. But I believe that it feels like it's hard to call it a free market when you start distancing yourself or taking entities out of the picture. So I agree with it surface level that foreign governments shouldn't buy farmland, but the deeper I dive into it, it becomes a question of free market to me, and I raise a question mark with that.
Rob, you're next.
Okay. Ultimately, I absolutely believe that we should limit it. No other country on earth will allow a foreign entity, government or other, to come in and buy property in their country. As an example, in China, if you open up a factory like Apple, they have an iPhone factory over there. They own the building. They do not own the land underneath it. It is owned by the Chinese government. And there's a reason governments do that. Now, I understand capitalism and all that, and I get it. But for national security purposes, you can't be selling off farmland. You can't be selling off ag and dairy producing land. They own, I think, about 40% of our debt right now, 37% of our debt or something like that. So, China has a hold on us as it is, and letting them come in here, and like the example we're talking about in North Dakota, where they wanted to buy land within spitting distance of a air base, that controls our drones, close enough to the one that controls our nuclear missiles. And now, I don't know if they had idea about this, but because the air base in South Dakota is getting ready for the B-21s to come in. They've moved all the B-1 Lancers up to the Grand Forks Air Force Base, and so those are nuclear capable. So, not a good idea. And I think it's we did the right thing in the state. I think we should do the right thing as a country and kind of just say no.
Mostly agree. I think that taking a common sense regulatory approach to it. So if you have somebody that's an adversary like China, I think it's very reasonable to very much look at that under a microscope, kind of like what happened in Grand Forks, where it wasn't like a straight up ban where they couldn't even start the process, but to have a process in place where when they propose something like that, the community can rise up, they can say no, the government can look into it, because that's pretty incredible to me that they really were that open-faced about it, to put something right next to the airbase like that. But at the same time, I don't think, in general, I don't like blanket ban policy as something. I like to be a little more nuanced with that kind of thing. So you say Sweden as an example wants to buy up a few acres in South Dakota to do a fertilizer study. I don't think that we should just ban all foreign governments from buying any land at all. Just take a measured approach to it and case by case.
Go ahead.
My just question is, I agree that largely the foreign government should be banned, and I think the nuanced approach is the best way to do it. But are we in favor or against someone that comes over, becomes a U.S. citizen from China, Sweden, wherever it might be?
That's a U.S. citizen.
But could they still be influenced by their prior government?
Well, absolutely.
Anybody could be.
I guess that's fair.
No, I mean, and that's the thing. You could have a U.S. citizen that's influenced, right? They just found three Army people that were transferring secrets to China or something like that, right? So, I mean, I don't think you can't go that route. But when a foreign entity, again, especially an adversary like that, does Switzerland want to come in and buy anything? They've had years to do it. They just haven't. So.
Jonathan, do you know if
I'm sure
Switzerland
there's
wants
got
to?
to be somewhere in the country
we're
that Swiss
thinking
has
about
bought like a few acres.
You'd probably guess. So, I mean, Japan's another one. Japan owns large sections of a lot of large cities. They own buildings and properties in Seattle and Portland and areas over there. So,
Okay, going on to the next one. We're gonna end with a couple of intense ones. So we'll go to immigration enforcement and legal residents. All right. So obviously, immigration enforcement has been something that has been a priority of the Trump administration. Some say that we're not really talking about border security on this. If you bring that in, that's fine. But it's more the enforcement on the U.S. side when they are doing their sweeps or whatever and deporting illegal immigrants. We have the person that's going to start this one with Kyler.
It's me. So I think we got to find a better way to settle this. I believe that you should not come to the U.S. illegally, and if you do so, I believe you shouldn't be allowed in. However, I believe that process needs to drastically changed. I believe it should be cheapened. It should be the time should be shortened on it, and I don't believe it should. It should be just generally a simpler process. America was built on immigrants. We thrived on it, and we currently have a working shortage in a lot of our areas, especially like Minot. I believe it's something that would be beneficial to have. However, again, I believe in the current setting, and I do not believe that we should, from the federal level, be giving a penny to any illegal immigrant by any stretch of the imagination. I believe that they should be, again, prosecuted and made to do it the right way. But again, I further that point by saying I truly and firmly believe we need to simplify the process to make it an easier and more streamlined thing for people to get into the country.
I have paused the time. I want to say to those that are leaving comments, keep leaving them. At the end, we're going to go through them and allow addressing of the comments.
Oh, gosh.
So keep leaving comments. We'll go with Zach next.
So trying to keep on the topic itself, so immigration enforcement, right? So
yeah, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think I just have concerns. So we saw in the campaign trail that Donald Trump said that he wants to undergo mass deportation, the largest deportation operation in history. And we're gonna see. We're already seeing a lot of reports out there of U.S. citizens who are being detained and held for pretty long periods of time just because they're Hispanic. That's the kind of stuff that really concerns me. And then even like kind of relating it back to the economy, we have a lot of migrant workers here and such. And if there's been reports of like the produce being left out to rot in fields because there aren't people out there working in those jobs because they're fearful of immigration enforcement. There's a lot of things that we can do to reform the system. I just worry that this like very hard-handed approach isn't going to be what's going to help us, especially as costs are so high. We want to give people the opportunity to work and to be good citizens here, or just good residents, I should say. And to really solve this problem, I think we're going to need, asylum reform and getting more judges down to adjudicate those claims, and overall, just trying to think what the last piece was. I'll just yield for now.
Sounds good.
I'm all for it. You let 10 million or more people illegally into this country over the last 4.5 years, whatever it was. I mean, there was some under Donald Trump. There's been massive amounts under the Biden administration. It's a strain on our economy. It's a strain on our country. It's a strain on our resources. And to Zach's point, he talks about the migrant workers. We have migrant workers here in North Dakota. If you come in with a migrant worker visa, you're not going to get deported. So if you're here legally doing the right thing, there's no issues. But if you're here illegally, you've already broke that law. I mean, you came to the country illegally. That's a law.
Most of them came legally, and then their visa just expired. And then
I'm not talking about the overstayers. We're talking about
the bulk of them.
We're talking they're the massive amounts of people, the illegal gangs.
Come on, man.
You're telling me there's no Trende
I'm not telling you
gang in Denver?
But again, like we're talking like scale here. So like if there's
there's 10 million people that came into our country in a 4-year period. Granted, the majority of them aren't criminals, but they came here illegally, right?
They're not in the asylum claims.
Well,
do you want to redo the asylum law?
Do you know why they're asylum claims? Because Joe Biden's administration gave them a phone and said, "This is what you say when you get to our border," right? I mean, that didn't happen.
That's more so after the fact. They didn't give them and then they apply.
They were
do you want people to show up for the hearing or not?
They were getting phones while they were traveling across Mexico from groups of people down there. So so they could get to the border and do their electronic filing. Hey, I want to come into your country and claim asylum. And that was what they were told to do. So anyway,
I guess my question to that is, why were they coming through Mexico in the first place then?
Because Mexico allowed it.
Why were they leaving their country in the first place?
Well, because they think that they can come up here and get free. They can get free. They can get, and that's what they did. We gave them hundreds of millions of dollars when they came across our border in phones, in food vouchers, in housing vouchers, in apartment vouchers, in healthcare. That's all on us. We paid all of that. Yeah. I'm not here to pay for the world.
Okay.
Yeah,
I disagree with that.
Again, we had a conversation earlier where we didn't even think the state should have to pay for Catholic schools, right? But we should pay for a bunch of people coming here illegally. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
some of them come, and you know this, but some of them come. When I lived in Oregon, you'd have them, and they'd be just sending money back home.
Yeah,
they just have one person. If you can make it in the U.S., then you can take care of your family back in Mexico, because $4,000 is a lot of money in other places. And I don't really fully understand the point of your question of why. It's not like you're saying why would they want to leave Mexico,
or why would they want to leave the country of their origin?
Central America mostly,
and is
almost all of them. Yeah,
exactly. There's a reason for that. Why do they not want to be in the country, and why do they want to seek out America?
And how much worse is it going to get now that we dismantled U.S. aid and we're not going to be helping stabilize those governments anymore?
U.S. aid was a slush fund to give to
nonsense.
Like we needed to give condoms to Ghana so they didn't have babies down there. Like we spent millions of dollars on silly stuff. That's all that was.
You can pick out little line items here, but then the bulk of dismantling all of USA is going to have disastrous.
I could show you on the website 4 people in the city of Minot that got aid from USAID. Why?
So,
from
big time question.
Let's show me. Let's look at that.
I'll show you when we're done.
Please.
Is Trump's the next question? We have to move on.
Good segue.
Are you trying to keep names out of this?
No, I'm not. I don't care. We can name names,
We're out of time.
but that's a whole other topic. It would have been a great one. We should have added it. Is the next question? Kyler's going first on this one. The randomizer just loved Kyler at the end.
Yes.
Is Trump's handling of the media healthy? Under the Trump administration, there's been a restructuring of media access. There's been more allowance for podcasters and independent journalists, while there's been a crackdown on news agencies. Specifically, there was the ordeal with the AP not willing to follow the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico that Trump set forward to the Gulf of America. Of course, Trump also has his direct way of handling the media. Has the Trump administration's handling of the media been healthy for we the people?
So, to start at the top, I'll start with the positives. I believe that it is a fantastic thing that he's allowing more people into the media room. I think we should have, I fully believe in freedom of the press, and you should have as many people with access to that as you can possibly get. On the flip side of that, so while AP is still available to enter the regular press briefings with the press secretary, they're barred from the Oval Office pressers and other presidential events. I don't think you should be able to pick and choose with the press. I believe that goes against the freedom of the press and the Constitution. Even if it's something you don't agree with, I believe it should be all or nothing. Either
Hold on here. The Constitution says we can't restrict what they write. It doesn't say we have to let them in the room. They can write whatever they want.
For a fact, but I believe if you're doing that, you should do it to everyone or no one at that stage.
Right, but is it a right or a privilege to get in to see the President of the United States? Because you and I don't get to go do it.
I believe you have to apply for that privilege.
Right, so it's a privilege.
Fair, yeah.
Right, and if you do something, just like our children, if you do something, you can lose that privilege, correct?
For sure, but I don't know if this is quite the thing that should be necessarily deeming of losing that privilege just because you're just...
That isn't our
So
call,
just
though.
a hypothetical,
fair.
Rob. Let's say that the Fox News was in the press room during Biden's presidency and they refused to say undocumented immigrant. They said that, or excuse me, they refused to say, undocumented immigrant, because the Biden said you cannot call them illegal aliens. And then they kicked them out of the press room. Like, you think that's cool?
How many times did she not call on Peter Doocy when he was in there? All the time,
Yeah,
right?
Like but they're in the room and they're able to
correct.
like still
correct. And the
everything.
AP can come into the regular press room. They're just not allowed into the Oval Office because they were shouting questions and doing something they weren't supposed to do, right? I mean, that they asked them to stop, they didn't stop, and then they said, "Okay, now you've been restricted." So I
haven't
get
heard
your
the
point.
shouting thing.
Yeah, they were shouting questions at the end of it or whatever it was, and I don't remember what was said. Something was said that somebody didn't like. I don't know if it was Trump or whoever, but sorry, and I kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
but
take it
I
down.
think
My point was made.
I think this is great. this is how the press has treated Donald Trump for the last 8 years of his life, during his presidency, during Biden's presidency. The majority of our national media has treated Donald Trump like a diaper. And so now he's giving it back to him. And I think, just like I tell my kids, you get what you put in. Don't expect something different if that's how you're going to treat everybody on the other side. So,
yeah, I mean, to that point, at a certain point, like, Donald Trump deserves a lot of the flack he gets. Like,
wow.
Yeah, 100%. He tried to steal the last election. He fomented an insurrection against the Capitol. Like, of course,
is that why they won't release 1,100 hours of video from the Capitol, or is
that's nonsense.
That was Donald?
Well,
they released everything
with him as president now.
It was the most recorded
event.
Sorry, go ahead.
With him as president now, why can't he have them released? Like you said, he's going to release the JFK files, all of the Epstein files, and what was
I believe it's Congress said that
they're blocking it.
Yeah,
okay.
It's the most recorded event in human history. Everybody had smartphones. Like, I don't think that's an issue. Anyways, to stay on topic here with the media, there's a couple things I wanted to bring up. So I think it's cool to have other outlets in. I just don't like when nepotism gets involved with it. Like, we saw it in full display with the Zelensky Oval Office spat, where Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend was allowed in as a press for his little podcast, and he says, like, why aren't you wearing a suit, bro? Like, as if he's not actively in a war. Like, that's the kind of downsides you can get from that when you don't let, like, actual people with journalistic integrity in there, and just, like,
hold on now.
Random people.
You're going to a meeting, and it's probably the most important meeting of your life, and you can't put a suit or, I mean, I got up this morning and I didn't put sweatpants and a t-shirt on to come in here. I don't see why that has any bearing on anything. Like,
it doesn't have bearing on anything, so why even ask about it? Like,
I think it's a valid question. Have you ever seen any foreign dignitary come to meet with the president or
I've seen Elon Musk in a t-shirt in the Oval Office.
But he puts a jacket on over it
because
he's Elon, right? So he's Elon.
No words about that. Anywho, I need to bring home the last bit of my point here with the media, and it's very troubling. So I think Donald Trump in his second term looks to be one of the most anti-First Amendment presidents in history, if not the most. And the two examples I would cite with that is that the Des Moines Register put out a poll before the election that had Kamala Harris up 3 points. They used methodology they always used in the past, and Donald Trump is suing that outlet to basically say, like, I can't believe you do this to me. Even though there's no merit to it, it's all just to bully. And the same thing goes for CBS, suing them for $1 billion because they deceptively edited, even though that kind of editing happens across the board. You can see it when Donald Trump was on a Fox News town hall. They edited that like crazy when they said they're going to release the Epstein files. They put it out there like he's like, yes. And then his actual long answer was like, I don't know about that. Like, these places have the freedom to edit these things. And the fact that he's suing them for billions of dollars just as an intimidation tactic it's awful. So I'm not a fan.
We're out of time?
Yeah, I guess we're out of time. So basically I ain't pulling my overtime. My overtime, we're going to go through these questions. Right. There's a couple of them that are interesting. We'll go way back here. Sherry McLaughlin. This is when we were talking about school funding, private and public schools. She said, it'd be like saying, I want to be a country club member, so I want the government to give the taxes I pay to support Surge Valley Golf Course so I can pay my dues at the country club. Any thoughts from anybody on this?
Spot on, Sherry.
Okay, Drob, do you have any thoughts?
Great opinion. I'm not opposed to it, but again, if the state's going to fund, they should fund for everybody, not just public. It's that simple.
Yeah, me personally, I don't think it applies the same. Right. But that's me personally.
Obviously, education's a lot more than recreation.
Yeah, but there's that. But even how the money is distributed, I still don't. I mean, you're still paying to go to Surge Valley Golf Club. Sure, it's probably subsidized some by the Parks District, with some of the people there. Obviously, I'm not into the idea that the government actually starts subsidizing private deal, but there was probably also different, a lot more feedback. I don't know. I don't feel like it applies great. I'll go work on my answer at home. Okay.
That's the on the spot, John.
Have you looked at the recent at this morning, which is not great on speed? Have you looked at the recent proficiency rates of ND public schools, which is on that? That was also interesting. Should we be focused on increasing those proficiency rates? I was private schooled, so that's why I can't say the word. But
as someone that lived through No Child Left Behind, I don't think schooling should be based on test scores and proficiency percentages.
So what
do you measure it on then?
Yeah, what there has to be some type
you're
of measure,
a good
right?
kid, you pass.
No, I think generally I don't think they should have no meaning to having good grades, but I don't think that should be the only thing that awards schools funding and better standing than another school.
Yeah,
but how would they rate it?
To say like, hey, if you struggle with your test scores, we're going to strip funding. Like that's the opposite.
But if you have because then what you can say is like Bismarck's just smarter than mine. Like I'm not like basing this on actual numbers, but what I'm saying is if there's a school district that has a very high proficiency rate, and then there's a school district that has a very low proficiency rate, are we just saying that all the smart kids are in this area? like we're not saying, we would not agree with that, right?
Right.
Like there has to be something. There has to be still some meter.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to look at it is how much what actually goes into the proficiency. Is it just test scores? Like I know a lot of No Child Left Behind included, or is there actually more nuance that goes into that? I would have to look into that. But
I was just simply going to say if you do the more funding as they do worse, you're going to have those guys out there that are like, hey, I know how to get more funding. Let's fudge the test scores and make them look bad, because you always get the bad actors. I mean, and so ultimately you have to have something to measure it. And by saying, hey, if you're not going to do the better job that we're asking you to do, we're going to have to take away some of that funding. I think that should motivate them. Kind of, again, let's go back to the kids. Make your bed, get your allowance. Don't do it, don't get your allowance. It's the same kind of principle.
it's fair. And I guess it just depends what goes into that proficiency. Yeah. I think that's fair.
David Wagan. I'm probably pronouncing your last name wrong. Sorry, David.
Wagan.
There we go. Why would a country with 40 million citizens have an equal amount of imports as a country with 340 million citizens?
Yeah, that makes no
sense.
This
was on the imports exports.
The whole like trade surplus deficit being like we're subsidizing Canada. That's nonsense. They have way less people than us. Like of course they're not buying as much from us as we buy from them.
Stu, I think he kind of rebutted that with Canada needs America. America doesn't need Canada, which is a whole other interesting conversation.
We'll see about that.
Okay.
90% of our potash for fertilizer comes from Canada, so good luck finding new channels for that.
Those were some of the better comments.
One quick one I want to say, Marie, you mentioned House Bill 1318 in the comments, and you did on Tuesday. I've looked into that. Next Tuesday, I'm going to talk about it in depth.
Marie, it's coming. She mentioned Belgium is a new investor of Fufeng land, which is Fufeng is the stuff that you were talking about.
Yep.
That was close to the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So Belgium is in the mix. So there's a bill that's in the House not in the House and the legislature, that would kind of prohibit or minimize the amount of stuff that could development that could happen without the Air Base's approval on those developments. Not approval, just input.
Yeah, most of that has been kneecapped. Right now, it's not even a bill; it's a study or whatever they changed it to.
Yeah, so. But I think some of that, honestly, I'm on the side that says that might be all right.
Well, it is, but they had a 25-mile envelope on there, which means for Minot, the base would have control from the base all the way to about the radar base south of Minot, which how can you, as a city wanting to grow and develop, have an entity being able to tell you what you can and can't put up? That's tough.
Somebody, Lisa Olsen says, include me in the conversation regarding education. There are a lot of assumptions being made without basis in fact. That would be a great podcast. We will follow up on that. Competition makes everything better. And something else that'd be interesting is help us understand the city's approach toward merit-based pay. A lot of great comments today. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, leaving those. Appreciate you coming on, Zach. It was a good, thorough discussion. You coming on, Rob. It's a good time as always. Kyler, I still don't know why you're here. I still don't know who you are.
Why am I here?
So thank you for watching this episode of North Dakota Talk. We'll be back Tuesday, 1 p.m. with some Minot stuff coming out of City Council. We're going to be joined by Kim Funningsland as we kind of highlight the Anita Knutson trial that is kicking off on Monday. And then Thursday, we'll be back 8 a.m. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.